Thank you. Good morning. I guess that through the presentations yesterday and some of today, uh, probably show how to put together the IND and what elements we need and how we assess it and what we're looking for. In my presentation now, I'm going to try to demystify what happens in our side once you send the 3 volumes or the electronic and wait. 30 days that you need to wait. So in a little bit, I'm going to try to tell you what it is, where to send. It's almost more practical and more what do we do and where do we do it. Okay, again, this is my disclaimer, even though in essence, my slide has been reviewed again.
But I've got her slides ready to go.
So this is what's going to happen. What happened in the first 30 days? What happened when you send it? How do we receive it? How do we manage it? I'm going to tell you what happened if, thanks goodness, everything you have learned in the first 2 days brings us a beautiful, wonderful IND submission, and there's nothing that we need to comment, and you can go on safe to proceed. And later on, if not, what happened with the clinical hold and how to address it or resolve it, and how do we impose it? This is what we do in our side. And again, 2 other items that sometimes come to our attention of our sponsors or not, and is what the inactivation or the termination of the IND. I move my head, and I feel that the microphone doesn't get all of it. Can you hear in the back? Or good. Thank you. Okay, what happened with the first 30 days? You work very hard, compile your IND, and you send the IND to what is our central document room. Central document room is located in Beltsville. I'll give you the address later on. This is where all the submission get stamped. The minute it arrives, if it's not submitted through what is called the gateway, that's from your company to our company, it gets to the central document room. It gets the first stamp. We received it. And that's usually the same receipt date as you get in your FedEx package. It's received on that day. And if you send it in electronic format, it gets loaded in our electronic document room. We have it and we have access to that. And if you're going to submit in paper, and individual investigators can still submit IND in paper, so not too many are doing, you need to send 3 copies. And you send it to the central document room. And from there, they send it to the location where we are in White Oak. And they send it to our White Oak document. We need to track it. And our current system for tracking is called DARTS. So if anybody, whenever you call the agency and tell them, I need to look in DARTS or I need to DART it, this is where it goes. We figure out where our submissions are, when it was received, when is the date, how many volumes, where we located. And it's assigned, the IND is assigned to the divisions by the indication, as Kevin mentioned yesterday. It's done by endpoints. And where is the subject matter expert located in the agency? For example, oops. This is the same thing as Kevin yesterday, right? Uh-oh. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 9. Can you help? I'm good. I'm technologically handicapped. Barely able to use my cell phone. But anyway. My kids go like this, and I don't know how they do it. For me, I need to think which button I press. Oh, I understand. Probably many of you feel the same way I do, but it's okay. Okay, this is jumping. Okay, when the IND arrives to the agency, it comes to what is called, in OND, in the Office of New Drugs, comes to what is called the Chief Project Management Staff. This is people like Chief. I hate that name. I would like a different name. Probably the next reorg, we're not going to be chiefs. I don't like it, but anyway. It's not my decision. And they send it to us. And the first thing we do is it going to be reviewed in my division? Because it's done by endpoints. And sometimes the clarifications are not clear. That depends what are the endpoints in the IND you're measuring. And we talk among ourselves. And sometimes it comes to my division and say, yes, it's okay. Send it to me. For example, I'm going to give you a very small example of what the nuance is and what it is. In our division, we do division of ophthalmology and transplant products. And by transplant, the division does the product that do solid organ transplantation, heart, liver, kidney, lungs. Sometimes we do esoteric things like hand transplant or face transplant, but those are not the norm. If an IND and a sponsor wants to study a drug to evaluate virus load on BK virus, for example, and sends the IND and says, we are going to measure the BK virus in kidney patients, because this is very common, and that's one of the problems of this viremia in transplanted patients. If the endpoint is going to be, we're going to review and evaluate the virus content in this specific population, that IND will be reviewed by the people of the Division of Antivirals, because this is where the subject matter relies. However, if the sponsor wants to evaluate their IND and is going to study the effect of the BK virus in the viability or how the transplant progresses, or the viability of the transplant, or if there is rejection in the transplant, the people who are going to look at it is the people in my division who look at how do we work with the transplant itself. Of course, we are in contact with the people, the Office of Antivirals, but the Office of Antivirals is in contact with us to make sure that we have the subject matter expert, or in the specific population, or in what it is, what we are evaluating, what we are measuring. In case of that, pick up the phone and call us before. If you think that it's going to come to the division of transplant, call us. Pick up the phone and try to talk to the regulatory project manager. Kevin Booking yesterday morning gave us a list of all the divisions with the contact phone numbers. It's very hard to, on us to be able to process if we don't have the 30 days that it's submitted. So try to call ahead of time and say, do you think that it's going to go to your division? Can you suggest where it goes? We can forward. Email is fantastic. I push the button and send it to the other people and tell them, is it coming to me or not? Because we have an IND, and for INDs, we have 30 days to look at it. And if the IND comes on a Thursday, and we are not sure if it comes to my division or the Division of Antivirals, and we make a decision Friday, maybe we send the email. And Saturday and Sunday, unless it's for emergency, we are not in the office, and Monday is a holiday, so the IND will not get decided what's going to happen until maybe Tuesday, Wednesday. So the reviewers will have less time than 1 week went by without the reviewers looking at it, and they don't like that. And we respect their work and their workload. So call us. Don't be afraid of picking up the phone and calling, because we try to make your life easier and ours too. So once the IND came to the central document, comes to me, and I assign a project manager. And here comes my second piece of advice. Work with the project manager, because that person, he or she, is your liaison with the agency. Any communications you need to go through the project managers. I have 3 project managers in this setting, and they know that they're ready to pick up the phone and talk to you anytime you have any question. Of course, don't bombard them every day, but because they have other things. But email is a great source of contacting them. The project manager will issue an acknowledgement letter, and we do the tracking and management of the process. We have time to look at it and make sure during 30 days if IND is safe to proceed or not. The project managers are in charge of securing a team. Basically, we have all the elements there. In some instances, the last ones is very interesting, because for the people of antimicrobial and antiviral drugs, we need a clinical microbiologist to assess the clinical microbiology. For example, for the products who are IV or intravenous or need to be sterile, all the products that they are for ophthalmology indications for the eye by regulation needs to be sterile. So anytime we have an IND, we need to get an evaluation of the sterility of the product. And if you're going to send an IND to us that is for a product for ophthalmic, you need to make sure that you have sterility assessment, that the product that's going to be in or around the eye is sterile. And sometimes we need to issue consult to other groups. Many times we need to issue a consult to people in CDER, Center for Devices, because if the product is a combination, we need to issue a consult because we don't have the subject matter expert. So the agency needs to make a decision within 30 days, 30 calendar days. From the first day it was stamped in the central document room. So we have only 30 days to do that. And during that time, this is the most intense time we have. And in my view, one of the critical elements, because the decision we made has relevance if it goes the first time in humans or not. And this is what we assess during the 30 days. We assess the safety of the proposal and the clinical study that you are proposing to add. If at a certain point during the 30 days, and I'll tell you how we work on those 30 days, if the study is safe to proceed, it's fine. It's safe to proceed and you can go on those in humans. But if not, we impose what is called a clinical hold. Some letters issue letters, some letters do not issue letters. The regulations do not require for us to issue a letter telling you it's safe to proceed. In my particular division, there's a therapeutic area where no news is good news, and I don't write a letter. In the other therapeutic area, we issue a letter telling you it's safe to proceed or not. It varies with the division you have. In many instances, your IRB might want a letter or not, and I don't know how that works with your particular IRB. The last bullet is my pet peeve. If you can learn something today and grant me the wish of learning this pet peeve for me, is INDs are not approved. We do not approve INDs. We deem them safe to proceed. We say you can proceed or they're in clinical hold. The only thing that we approve in the agency is new drug applications, NDAs. And the people who approve research is your institutional review board, or what we call IRB. There's nothing that whenever sponsor calls me and tells me, is my IND approved? And I say, no, we do not approve INDs. It's not. It's safe to proceed. And this is really relevant because that's what's written in the regs. So let's assume that we discuss how does it work. We schedule meetings, internal meetings, to discuss if there is any issues. For example, in my divisions, Monday mornings at 10 in the mornings, we review INDs. And if there are no safety issues to discuss, we don't discuss. But if we have any issues or the non-clinical studies have problems, or the chemistry, we don't have enough information to safe to proceed, or if there are issues with the trial design that might not be ethical for phase 3 trials, we put the IND on clinical hold. What does it mean? We tell you, stop. You cannot go into humans now. We need more information in order to be able to do that. How does it work? It can happen as a full clinical hold, so you cannot do anything of your study, or you put you in partial clinical hold. How could be a partial clinical hold? I had recently a case of a IND that the sponsor wanted to go into humans on a drug that was never looked before. It's a new drug, never in humans before, and they wanted to use 5, 10, 25, and 50 milligram doses in humans. But they only had non-clinical information for the 5 and the 10. We don't have data what happened in the higher doses. There is no information. The agency will not go there because we don't know what's happened with the non-clinical, what adverse events we need to monitor, what is going to happen with that. So the sponsor was put on partial clinical hold. What does it mean? You can go in the 2 lower doses because we have enough information. And as Hanan says, we send them a letter telling them, by the way, we need information on non-clinical studies in order to be able to go to the higher doses. And they did that. And they're working on the higher doses. So it's full or clinical hold. And this is what the agency does. I give you some information on what is the reason we can impose clinical holds and regional significant risk of illness. Most of the time, the second bullet, even though it's listed in the guidance, it's listed in the regulation. I have yet to find an IND that has the clinical investigators are not qualified. That's a part that we give a lot of credit to the sponsors and investigators. They are most of them qualified. I never had to find that. Investigator brochure, we work around that. That can be modified. We discuss with you. The thing is, one of the major items that we have is we don't have enough information to assess it, to make sure that we can make a determination if it's safe to proceed or not. Recently, I have an IND where the sponsor sent A protocol very well designed for an eye indication for a product that it's approved for other indications. And he's going to take it and compound it in a company who does the compounding of the product for ophthalmology use. But there was no chemistry information in my IND. Nothing. Zero. So when I received that, I pick up the phone, call the sponsor, and say, you know what, I have this information, the drug is approved for other indication, but I don't have any chemistry. Oh, we are working with a company who is a contract research organization, and it's going to do for us a compounding, but we didn't decide how to do it. And we say, well, we cannot allow you, and it may, however, will happen. You need to give us that information. We need to know if the product is sterile. How are you going to do it? If the dose that you think you compound is correct. So he understood that. And it's in clinical hold. Until we can find information to assess that there is or no risk to the subject, that is going to be on clinical hold. And sometimes it's exclusion by gender, but I have yet to find that. Again, a lot of these elements of a clinical hold or not, it depends on the product. It depends mostly on the therapeutic area and the risk you're willing to take for a specific population. For the phase 2 or 3 trial, it's same elements that I said before, but also the protocol in its design doesn't meet the criteria, and it will be unethical to conduct a phase 3 clinical trial that does not, the design is not sufficient to meet the objectives. If we have a clinical hold, we don't like to put INDs on clinical hold. And probably the sponsors don't want it either. So we pick up the phone and call you and try to resolve the issues. If we can along the way, we talk to the sponsors. We tell them we need this additional information. And my PMs can attest to that. We pick up the phone, we call them, we send an email, wait for them to respond. They don't respond until 2 days before the 30 days, day 28 or not, but we work on that. So we try to address any one of the issues that we can. And discussions, modify the protocol. We had an another IND where they're coming with, they submitted a protocol for a single dose, and they submitted in the IND a protocol for the multiple dose. And we need, okay, I have it here. So we need to have the single dose to figure out what happened before. It's the first time we go in humans. We take it very seriously, the safety of the patient. So what did we do? And this is a corollary that I'm going to talk later on. Talk to the sponsor and says, the first single dose is going to be fine. I think that you need to modify your protocol or take away the multiple dose. Don't include it. Send us a submission and say, I'm only going to do the single dose, and I'm going to do the multiple dose after I resolve that. And if this is written, we solve an issue of clinical hold. You're not going on clinical hold, and they do not. The division directors are the person delegated to make the decision and the responsibility to make a final choice and talk to the sponsor. If it is a commercial sponsor, the division director will pick up the phone with the subject matter expert. If it goes on clinical hold because we don't have chemistry, the chemist will be. If it's a clinical hold where there is no clinical information, the non-clinical reviewers will be there, and we pick up the phone and call them. If it is a clinical hold for sponsors, the delegation of the notification can be boiled down to the project manager. The decision is always done by the division director. We notify the sponsor, say, by the way, you are on hold. And at that moment, we know that goes on hold. We pick up the phone, we talk, we craft a memorandum, put it in the file. The IND goes on clinical hold. And we have 30 days to write a letter specifically stating you're on hold for the same reason we mentioned to you on the phone call. And by the way, this is what you need to do to get off of clinical hold. That's what Hanan was explaining. You solve all the issues, did everything that the agency told you. You were good, we were happy, and you resubmit again. Well, if you resubmit again, the project manager will look at it, you say it, but we have another 30-day cycle. So you send your submission with a new non-clinical study to go to the multiple dose. We have 30 days to review that. And the project managers also, again, send you an acknowledgement 30. And we have 30 days later to continue working on that. There is a process of appeal. If you do not agree with the agency cited in the clinical hold, you always can ask a request for consideration. We are very amenable to listen to you. And there is another process that goes one more time, and it's the dispute resolution. And if you ever reach to that, and I had my 18 years with the agency, I had only one case where the IND went to dispute resolution. Only one. So it's not very common, but it's there. And you can go, and there is a guidance how to request dispute resolution at the steps you need to take for that. Now, when you get your IND, if an IND is in clinical hold for more than 1 year, the FDA can place it on inactive status. That means that inactive status, you don't need to submit annual reports, and the IND is still there. You can always refer to that, but you cannot conduct studies if an IND is in inactive status. In order to change from inactive back to active, you need to submit a protocol and wait 30 days. The other option that is by regs is an IND that remains on inactive status for 5 more years may be terminated. And the FDA will send you a few letters before, so it doesn't come as a surprise. But in essence, in the best practices that I'm coming now, I will address many of the issues that I discussed previously and how to make it easier on all of us. You send your IND, and it's a lot of work. There's a lot of things that need to be assembled, a lot of papers, a lot of copies, a lot of discussion with your consultants. Do we have everything we need? We have a check mark on everything. You send it finally. Thanks goodness I send it. Now I can go on my vacation. Once upon a time, I used to say you go to the Caribbean. It's not now, but let's assume that you decided to go on your, because you plan your vacation around that, right? It's my IND send a vacation. Please, because we have only 30 days to review it, and in essence it's less, because our reviewers, by day 30, we need to make the determination. So usually our reviewers need to know if it's safe to proceed or not by day 25. And if we lost the week before, so it's in 17 days that they need to look at the data. So it's very labor intensive, and we need to have a phone number of somebody to contact. If you went on vacation, good luck to you, and I'm glad that you were able to go on. But give us the name and the number and an email of another person we can contact in case we need additional information. And that person should have some kind of power of decision, because if we don't find the information or we cannot reach you, you go on clinical hold. And if I try to contact the sponsor and I don't get the sponsor, and I send an email and I don't get a reply back, and I call and the doctor is not there, and I call another time and the doctor doesn't call me, I craft my memo and said I did contacted you by phone, I call you this way, and by the way, the IND is on clinical hold anyway. We do not reach you. It needs to go on clinical hold, goes on clinical hold. Give us the name of the other person. For me, this is so crucial to have the name of the person or persons who can work on your behalf, or who can we contact. The other thing is, anybody know, Maureen talked yesterday about the 1571, right? 1571 is the official cover letter for the INDs. FDA form 1571. Every submission you send to the agency needs to include a 1571, because this is your cover letter. It tells us who is the sponsor, what is the address, if you have an alternate name to call you, what is the nature of the submission you send. Always include a 1571. And please, if something changed, change the 1571. Address. You move from one building to the other building, send the 1571 and tell us we changed the address. It's very important, because if we not, we don't know how to. Whenever I write a letter, in my project managers write any correspondence, we go to the latest submission and figure out what is the address that you put in the 1571. Hopefully it's the same one you put in the cover letter. But the regulatory cover letter is the 1571. Always include that and update it. Once upon a time, things have changed along. We used to have everything in paper, and the INDs came in triplicate. We needed 3 jackets, a red, an orange, and a green. Red, that is the archival, somebody's shaking the head. The green is for the chemists, the orange is for the farm talks and non-clinical reviewers. Currently, there is a lot of influence, and people are sending INDs in electronic format. We accept a format for commercial INDs starting in May of next year. You need to submit in electronic. But if for individual investigators, we will accept if you can send it in a CD, a PDF version. And the PDF, if possible, have it bookmarked or hyperlinked because it's easier to look at it. But if you still want to send red, orange, and green binders, this is the place where you can get the copies. If not, just go to Staples, buy the ACO binders, and send us the 3 copies. Again, if you're going to send paper copies, use the cheapest paper you can find and do it double-sided because we archive only 1 copy. I'm all for saving trees and saving. The reality is the sponsors spend a lot of resources printing, buying the paper, putting the binders, and giving it to us. And in reality, we spend money later on to dispose of those because the INDs are proprietary information, it's confidential information. We cannot throw it in the trash. We put it in specific bins that they're locked and they're handled by a company who has an agreement of confidentiality. So try to do that. And if not, try to see if you can submit it. If you're a single investigator, try to submit it if you can in a CD. Did I put anything else here? Okay, in case you want orange green binders, this is historical, probably becomes. Best practice, please proofread your submission. I understand that, yes, it's true, page 14. Okay, we look to page 14, and suddenly there are 5 page 14 because it's page 14 by chemistry, and page 14 by the protocol, and page 14 by the farm talks. Which one are you talking about? So proofread, make sure that we have all the information we need. Make sure that the appendices are there. My recommendation is give it to somebody else to look at it, to see for global things, not the content, but the formatting. If you can put a table of context, it's great. And if you can hyperlink that table of context, it makes my reviewers very happy. Once upon a time, we have divisions on the sections. Color paper is fine, but if you have the tab, it's so much easier for us to flip it from one section to the other. Not a requirement. This is best practice. Please submit your IND, initial IND, that we need to wait 30 days to do that with 1 protocol. Just 1. Get it going. Get your IND to become effective. Let's make sure that it's safe to proceed. Wait for 30 days, and on day 31, you can submit the 2nd protocol, and you don't need to wait for the 30 days. And there is less risk to have an initial clinical hold. 1 protocol, if you can. Be available for discussion, I ask you. And again, if you're an individual investigator and you don't get funding, withdraw the IND or inactivate it. That way you don't need to submit annual reports, or you don't owe us anything, and you don't need to keep track of that even for your IRB. INDs can come in paper, in common technical document, paper, or regulatory format is what is written in the, Maureen talked yesterday about the electronic common technical document. And the regulatory format is what is described in the regs. If you're going electronic, it needs to be in CTD format. But I have sponsors who send CDs. They're being uploaded. We can look at it. And for individual investigator, there is no requirement. But for industry, as of May 18, all commercial INDs have to be in eCTD format. And Kevin mentioned yesterday, who do we consider commercial and non-commercial INDs? This is a big, broad element, but we're still debating how we're going to evaluate who is a commercial IND. In my view, if you have an LLC or an Inc. at the end, probably you're commercial. And the INDs has to be in that format now to work. And it makes all the life of all of us crazy. Where do I send it? Don't send the IND to my office. I like to receive mail, but not necessarily your IND. Send it to the doc. Why not? If you look at my desk, even though it's not pile up, I have 10 things going on at the same time. And if you submit an IND, yes, I'll try and say, oh, I'll take it to the document room immediately. But the problem is somebody else calls me and my division director wants something and a sponsor needs something else. And it's the end of the day and I had no chance to submit it. If you send it to the central document room, it will be stamped, it will be forwarded. It's the best way to send all your submissions to the central document room. It costs the same amount of money to send it to them than to me. actually could be cheaper or not, because you don't need to send it FedEx. If not, you need the FedEx with the signature. And if you have any questions about the electronic submissions, I had given them some links there to work. Be aware that you need to establish with us what's called a secure email, because the INDs we are talking, and the IND is confidential information. So the lawyers have determined that in order to be able to provide confidential information back, we need to have a secure email. Contact the people of secure email. They'll tell you what you need to submit. And if you have any question, call any one of the project managers, and we can tell you all the elements that needs to be done for the secure email. From what I understand, some people mentioned to me that costs a few $100s to set it up, but I cannot guarantee you that. Somebody mentioned to me. But contact the people and figure out. It's much easier, because if not, project managers cannot email you information, but we need to go to the fax machine and send it in a fax. If we send it in a fax, we don't have the ability to edit. If we send it by email, we can send you two documents, the PDF, and we send you the Word, and you can work on the Word format. And if you want to have an electronic, you can have a pre-assigned number. I cannot pre-assign a number, but these people can give you a number for your IND if you're going to go in electronic. I think that I'm done. I'm pretty good this time.
You were very good this time. Thank you, Judith. If you have questions for Judith in the room, please raise your hand or step up to the microphone. While we're waiting for people to get situated here, let's go with our first online question, please.
This is in regard to the 30-day rule. It's clear the 30-day rule applies to the initial IND, but how about the IND amendments? Does it apply equally to all IND amendments?
Stay tuned, because the next presentation will deal about the amendments. But it based to that, and it's very hard to grasp the notion. The only time you need to wait 30 days to start your clinical trial is when you submit your initial IND submission, because we make the initial determination. And whenever you stay in the next talk, you're going to see what happened later on. If you have two protocols, send the initial. Make sure that it's okay, and we make the determination in 30 days. At day 31, proviso that there are some elements that you can address that notify the FDA and your IRB, you can start the second study. And at that point, it becomes our responsibility to see if it's safe to proceed in any time or not. First, but I will talk about the amendments in my next talk.
All right. And again, any questions in here? Raise your hand. I'll bring those microphone around. Right there. Okay, let's take another online question while I get this over here.
This question is involving sponsor investigators, and they're asking, may they send an IND CD versus 3 paper copies?
I could not understand the question.
Could you repeat, please?
This is in regards, a sponsor investigator wants to know, when they could they send in one IND CD compact disc versus 3 paper copies?
Yeah. We can say, okay, caveat. If it is a commercial IND until May next year, you can submit it in any other format. You can submit your IND one piece of paper that has the cover letter and all the information, and include the CD there. And the CD will be uploaded in the document room. If it's commercial INDs, you can still submit that. Like we said, we rather prefer the electronic. No papers if possible, because it's a lot of information, and the agency saves only one copy. The other ones is just printing paper, and it's going to go to recycling. So yes, please, you can submit one copy with SCD, submit a 1571, 3674, and all the regulatory information that you need, include the CD. The CD is going to be uploaded, and it comes to me in an electronic email that says, by the way, you have a new IND. And what I do is just push the button and says forward to one of my project managers. Thank you.
Okay, question here in the room, please.
Hi, thanks very much. That was a great talk, and looking forward to the next one. The question is with regard to the pre-IND process.
Okay.
So we're a new commercial sponsor, and so we had a very brief call with the division we thought we would apply to. And they said, could you please send us an email outlining the drug product and the potential indications? We just want to make sure informally that we'd be the right division for your submission. Two questions. The first one is, should we submit a request for a pre-IND or an application number now, before we submit the pre-IND?
You can or you don't have to.
Okay.
Because if a pre-IND comes in paper,
Mm-hmm.
more than that, up until May next year, if you're commercial, and for IND, that's not will that apply too? You can send an email to the Chief Project Management that it's in the list that Kevin gave you, and you say we request a pre-IND meeting consultation, and it has to follow the guidance information, the drug and the structure and what the intention and what are the people. There are 10 or 12 elements you need to do. We can assign a number at that point. But if you're going to do all electronic submission, you need to have the pre-IND assigned number, hopefully before. So it mostly, for now, either way it might work for the pre-IND.
Good, thanks, that's very clear. And the second question is, if we choose the paper route with no pre-IND number established, we would submit a cover letter on our own letterhead of the company, but not a 1571?
Okay, you are not required to submit a 1571. Okay. Because whenever you sign the form 1571, in the back page or in page number 2, it says that you agree not to start the study until you saw it by an IRB, and you need to have informed consent, and you agree to monitor and all the regulatory requirements. But under the pre-IND program, you don't have the IND yet. So you cannot dose humans. So there is no reason to sign the 1571. Having said that, there's always a caveat to anything, right? What we do, it all depends. I had recently a sponsor who called me, we're going to submit an electronic information and electronic IND, and I'm afraid that if I don't submit the 1570, pre-IND or IND, pre-IND or IND, I remember. And it says if I don't submit the 1570 as a pre-IND, if I don't, it's going to be electronic. It's going to be sent from their company to my company, what's called the gateway. You push a button in your end and it comes to our end. But if I'm afraid that if I don't have a 1571, it's going to be rejected. Because unfortunately, for the processing of those automatic submissions that go from one place to the other in gateway, you need to have a 1571 that states what is the IND number and what is the drug name, and that's the way they send it to us. So, bottom line is the following. We are not going to reject it. It's going to be processed manually instead of electronically. Having said that, my recommendation to the sponsor was include a 1571, so you get all the paperwork that says less problems later on, but don't sign it. And so you can have all the elements that the FDA require, have a 1571, but you don't sign it, so you don't commit anything to do the information on the clinical trials. Convoluted?
No, and actually the very last question is, so the serial numbering after the IND number 001 would be the IND submission. Yeah. Is that right? That would be number 1. Okay,
correct.
Perfect. Thanks.
Okay, we've got one more question in the room. Let me bring the microphone around.
Remind you, this link doesn't work. I just clicked it several times.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's okay. I will be here for lunchtime, and I do have the next talk. So,
well, we've got 20 seconds.
I can do it.
Let's do one more online question.
How do I know that my IND was received by the correct division?
Okay, how do you know that you submitted to the correct division or was received? What is the question?
Repeat the question, please.
Yeah. How do I know that my IND was received by the correct division?
You will receive a letter. Within 14 days, we should be able to issue a letter. Hopefully, you had a pre-IND before, and if you didn't have a pre-IND before, you call the agency and find out, I'm going to send an IND with these endpoints. If you're sure, send it. Within 14 days, right? 14 days, you issue the letter? Project managers? Yeah. I expect a yes from my people. Okay, good. You need to submit, and within 48. Most of the time, I do processing of INDs too, and whenever it's in my house and in-house, I pick up the phone or send an email to the sponsor and tell them, listen, we received it, it's in the process. Pick up the phone. The worst that can happen is they will put you through the project manager who has been assigned in DARTS, and I'll tell them, call Wendy or call Derek, and Ramo will tell you the information. Keep us informed. Keep the lines of communication open. In my division, we give our direct line. My project managers are instructed to have the direct line to the sponsors. We are working in it together, and we have the same common goal, to bring drugs that are safe and effective to the American public. We approach it from different sides, but let's keep talking. Just don't be afraid. And if you have a question, just ask. It doesn't cost anybody.
Okay, that's all the time we have.
Thank you.
Judith.